you so much for being here today. It's such a pleasure to have such a full house and be here to lead the conversation about these two wonderful books. Please forgive my pronunciation. I'm a local Madras Punnu from a North Indian family. So I request everyone to please put your mobiles on silent if you can. Thank you so much. We are here to discuss these two very fabulous books, in case you didn't get that already. Fascinating books published by Penguin India. Gauri's writing is an effortless read. The style and the conversations just flow. The easiness of Kalki's style of narration shines through these books. So don't be daunted by the size. Please do get your copy today. Thank you, Gauri, for being here.
Thank you.
So I'm going to get straight into it. Gauri, you have translated both fiction and non-fiction. 2 plays by the Marathi playwright Vijay Tendulkar, the Tamil short stories and 2 novels of Kalki and Kalki's biography. What are the challenges you face, if any, with fiction versus non-fiction?
Good evening to all of you. I'm absolutely thrilled that all of you are here to share this extraordinary moment with me, because I think probably this is the most difficult, the most demanding, and perhaps the most important work that I have done in my life. And I'm so happy that all my friends and lovers of books are here to share it with me. I'm particularly grateful to Mani sir for making the time to come here. I know how busy he is. He's deeply involved in a new film, and yet he made time to be here in order to release this book. And I cannot possibly think of anybody else who would be. I mean, he was the perfect person to release the book. I mean, it's not that he made a film based on Ponniyin Selvan, but the way he made it. And he has brought Kalki to an entirely new generation of people who had never heard of him. He was a Tamil writer, he was very well known in the Tamil-speaking world. But because of Mani sir, now the whole of India knows him, and some places in the world also have heard of, at least they know the words Ponniyin Selvan. And they say it correctly too, which surprises me. So I'm really grateful that he's here, and I'm delighted. Thank you so much. Okay,
Fiction
you
and
are you
non-fiction.
talking about fiction and non-fiction. Okay,
Translation.
the thing is, I don't know if there's all that much difference, because translation is a dreadful job anyway, whatever you do. I mean, it's not like writing your own stuff, you know. And when you're writing your own stuff, you're so free. There's the pain and the sweat and the horror of having to get through it, you know. Then because you're afraid that you may not be able to finish it, your imagination will dry up. But it's your own. So you don't have to be afraid of anything. The moment you take up somebody else's writing, it's so daunting, you know, because you have to do justice to that person, at least to the best of your abilities. And the worst translation I've done, I think, is the plays of Tendulkar. I did it because Vijayji asked me to translate them. And I translated them from Hindi, because I don't know Marathi all that well. I know Hindi well. So then we worked together, and there it's not, the translation is not about the language. It's about spoken language. It's not about the written language, you know. So it's a completely different cup of tea. It came to me because I'm a journalist and I'm used to interviewing people and writing, you know. But the language itself is very different, and it's a wholly different ballgame altogether. Then when it comes to non-fiction, the only one I've done, which is a very extremely daunting, huge 1,000 pages book. I don't know why these Tamil writers write so many pages, you know. I mean, there seems to be endless, you're swimming in the sea and you can't really get to the other side. So this 1,000-page biography of Kalki, I found it actually fascinating, because it is not about the writer so much as the entire first 50 years of the 20th century, the freedom struggle and the socio-political problems, the reformist campaigns, the Renaissance, and every other field was kind of springing up anew from education to science, industry, agriculture, you name it. So all those things Kalki was involved in. So it becomes a kind of a history of that period, and therefore I found it very interesting. But basically, you're conveying information, and you have to do it correctly. The same story of the freedom struggle, because as you know, Kalki was an activist. He was a rebel and an activist. He was a freedom fighter. The same story Kalki tells you in his, again, huge novel, Alai Vosai, which also I translated, because it is almost the same story, but told through characters who lived during that period. So it was the kind of, point and counterpoint. But here, the important thing is the experience of the characters, their emotions, what they undergo, not so much information. The information comes to you through the experience. So it's the other way around. Ponniyin Selvan is really tough because there is the political intrigue, which makes it, and it packs it with information, historical information, political stuff, and, social stuff. And there is so much of the cultural aspects, poetry, painting, sculpture. And yet, it is the character who is most important. All these things, so you have to pay attention to the ambience and all this stuff, as well as the human element. So I think you have to bring a different sensibility and a different attitude to whatever you take up.
Very true. Very true. I agree with you. So, in fact, it's very difficult, Gauri, to comprehend that Ponniyin Selvan is mostly fiction, because it's so steeped in history, It's stuff all of us have learned growing up. So where did Kalki, do you think, where did he draw inspiration from?
It's very clear to me that he drew it from sculpture and painting and architecture and poetry. Because he was, Tamil writers in particular, I don't see this in Marathi writers and Hindi writers, maybe Bengali writers. Tamil writers are they have what you call Tamil very. They're the frenzied attachment to their language, I don't think any other language calls, people of any language call their language Thai. I don't know, they talk about Marathi Thai and Hindi Thai. But Tamil Thai, Tamil Anangu, so this kind of, and so he was so involved in poetry, ancient Tamil poetry, Sangam poetry, as well as medieval poetry and modern poetry. Every day he used to recite or sing a Bharati song. So, so this kind of, and he was in the company of other people, literators, and they used to read and discuss poetry. I mean, I can't even imagine that anybody can do that today, right? So all that seeped into him, and I think that's where he got his inspiration basically from. But also, history was being discovered at that time. I think around that time, Nilakanta Shastri had produced his massive work, the Cholas. And there was Sadashiva Pandaratar who had written Pirkala Cholargal. So Kalki, those were his manuals, and he had them with him, and those books still have his margin notes. And what is so exciting is the one he discovers Vandiyathevan in Sadashiva Pandaratar's book. It's a book of history, right? And in the margin, he says, Pandaratar says that Vandiyathevan could have been a prince of the Vengi dynasty, which is north of Tamil Nadu. But Kalki says in the margin, Illai Vanar Kulattavan. He could have belonged to the Vanan tribe of Tamil Nadu. And that is where he starts. And the entire character of Vandiyathevan comes to him from a small poem that was recited to him by his dear friend T.K. Chidambaranatha Mudaliyar, who had nothing else. He was a BA, was a judge, high court judge. But he lived only for poetry. So one of the songs that he sang to Kalki, he remembered that and he asked him to write it, and I believe he sent it by return post, in those days postcard. And that poem was the beginning of creating Vandiyathevan, the character. Wow. So I think
and history,
apart from history, it's all these influences, I think, made him write.
Wonderful, wonderful. So Gauri, as you know, there are several lessons we learn from the books. I'd just like to read out a little bit. Where he says, it hardly matters whether you and I approve or disapprove, We may continue to squabble about our creed being the best in the world, but a ruler must support and nurture all the religions practiced by his subjects. The prince has grasped this truth instinctively. He puts it into practice when the occasion warrants it. So, what lessons from these books do you find relevant today? There are so many values that have been clearly highlighted, but which is the one that's most relevant to our times?
You know, this word lesson is something that I don't associate with literature. You know?
Okay.
It makes me think of classroom textbooks. For instance, you know, if you take the Mahabharata, just take out the Bhagavad Gita, and all that the Gita says you will find in the story. And that makes a greater impact on you than sitting and learning those verses. Sthita Pragyastaka Bhasha Samadhistasya Keshava. All that is there in the novel itself. I think our poets and writers have a way of making you understand concepts and giving you the freedom to think for yourself, you know, and decide what you want to make of it. That's why you can interpret a character or a situation in so many different ways, as we do, right? What you call dhvani, connotations, suggestion. Nothing is thrust down your gullet, you know. So I think Kalki was not thinking of any lessons, but Kalki was a propagandist, clear and simple. He began his life as a pamphleteer, a boy who had quit school and a pamphleteer in the Congress office in Tiruchi. So he was used to writing, you know, propaganda stuff, manifestos for the Congress party. So he was so influenced, and I don't think it's easy for us to understand the relationship that a tonder, or the person who served the leader, had for the leader, because those leaders have a women of stature which you can't think of now, right? So the kind of adoration that he had for Mahatma Gandhi, for Rajaji, who was his mentor, whom he didn't do anything without consulting Rajaji. And Patel, Maulana Abul Kalam Azad, you know, he has written about all of them. Nehruji is criticized, and he's also admired him for his charm. So he was a political journalist. We forget that Kalki was really a political journalist. He was writing The Leader in his magazine, The Political Leader, and writing columns on social reform, on political issues. Writing novels was a byproduct almost, except that we remember him for those things today. He wrote novels, and he says this very clearly in 1933 when someone accuses him of being a propagandist, saying that he should think of more aesthetic elements, he should bring more aesthetic elements into his book. And Kalki says very clearly, okay, let me say it in English, but I'm not sure all of you know Tamil. Writers, hundreds of writers will appear in the future in Tamil, and let them be in charge of creating works, marvelous works with aesthetic values. I am an old bandicoot. Let me be a propagandist all my life. That's how I began, and that's why I'm writing. So he was so sure that he wanted to infuse his values, his ideas. But if you're a good propagandist, you will do it in a way that the reader will not know that he's being guided there. You know, you imagine that you arrived at it by yourself, but very skillfully the writer is taking you in that direction, right? So he creates Ponniyin Selvan. Who is Ponniyin Selvan? Honestly, Ponniyin Selvan is an amalgam of Mahatma Gandhi's righteousness, Nehruji's charm, irresistible charm I believe he had, Patel's steel, Rajaji's integrity, and any number of other things, right? And what was the main thrust of Gandhiji's teachings? Secularism. So, you know, Ishwar Allah Tero Naam. So all those things, we don't know whether Rajaraja was really like that. He must have been, because, you know, the kings of that period did give donations to other institutions like Buddhist. There was no Islam here at that time. But to Jaina institutions, to Buddha institutions. There is a temple close to Tiruvannamalai where Kundabai has made a great donation to a Jain mandir. So there was some historical basis for that, but he creates it and spins it out to become a kind of a credo for all of us to follow. So if you like Ponniyin Selvan, then you have to believe that and if you think that Ponniyin Selvan is right, you have to believe that you must respect all religions. You have to believe that the fisherwoman is as important as the chief minister or some feudal lord. So very cleverly he creates this, and Kalki was convinced. He had an empathy for the socialist credo. He wanted. He was very fond of Jayaprakash Narayan, by the way. So he creates a character. So he makes a fisherwoman. Finally, this is a spoiler, but everybody is 75 years old, so it's all right. Pungureli becomes the queen. Finally, she's a fisherwoman.
Right.
Sendan Amudan, who's a gardener, he becomes a king. Right? So he was and there is nothing in history to say that Uttama Sora, who was crowned king after Sundara Chola, was a gardener or anything like that. So all these things he creates in order to lead you to the kind of India he envisions for the future. Ponniyin Selvan was started in 1950, the year India became a republic. What is the future that Kalki dreamed of? What was his vision for the future of India? You find it in Ponniyin Selvan.
Wonderful. That's wonderful, really. So throughout the book, I find Kalki was extremely progressive. It really surprised me. It gave me immense pleasure because there are a few things that he says. No, Kalki never underestimated women. His female characters drove the narrative forward. And later on in the book, there's this conversation where she says, but every woman has to get married someday. No Shastra says so, Vanati. What about Avai? Did she not remain unwed to live long as a great poet? Unlike you, by God's grace, Avai attained old age in her green years. So I want to know, Gauri, he created some extremely strong and very pleasing women characters for that day and age. Can you share a little bit about that?
I think you should read the book, but but I can tell you something about Kalki's attitude to women. I think that might be more interesting for you because it's not likely that you would have read one of his early novels called Tyaga Bhumi. It was also made into a film, and by the way, Kalki wrote saying that the director, Subramaniam, has changed his story, and rightly so, because that is a completely different medium. He actually said it in one of his writings. He says he's done a brilliant job with it's a different medium. Don't compare it with the novel. Read this and enjoy it. Watch that and enjoy it. So there he creates a character called Savitri. Now Savitri is a woman. She is the Sati Savitri, the kind of woman who follows her husband and falls at his feet and remains there forever, right? That is our story of Savitri. But Kalki creates a Savitri who is so tormented by her husband that she's kicked out of the house, and then she falls upon better days, and she becomes a rich person. She gets an inheritance. So the husband comes back and says that he wants her to come back and live with him, and then he lodges a case for the restitution of conjugal rights. Savitri goes to I saw this in a 10 o'clock morning show in a very Drabai kind of old theatre. But there were some people, it was actually quite packed. And in the scene where she appears in the court, S.T. Subbulakshmi appears in court and says that when a husband kicks his wife or wants a divorce, he gives her alimony. I will give him alimony, ask him to leave me alone. And the whole theatre burst into applause. Immediately following that, her father tells her, this land is called, Bharata Desham is called Tyaga Bhumi, a land of sacrifice. Why can't you make a little sacrifice and go back to your husband? And Savitri says, I will make any sacrifice for freedom. I will not make a sacrifice for slavery. So there was more claps in that hall. People stood up and applauded. This was written in the 1939. This film came out. Okay, wow. So it was written before that. So that was his attitude towards women, and you see that in Ponniyin Selvan. All the women are so brilliant, and they drive the narrative forward, as you said.
Brilliant.
And Kalki also loved physical stamina. He shows Pungureli, who's not only mental, she not only has mental grit, she's physical stamina.
Correct.
And he encouraged my mother, I believe, to be a tomboy.
Okay.
He wanted her to climb trees and, ride cycles and run races. So I love that.
That's really wonderful. So, Gauri, I can't even imagine the amount of work and effort that went into translating these. But to ask you, what was your favorite part in these two novels while you were translating?
My favorite part, I can't say, it's such a huge saga, I mean, it's difficult to say, but there is one, the thing I enjoyed in the parts in the novel that I really enjoyed and I kind of relived. And, when you listen to music, we nod our heads, right? So I nodded when I was reading it, I think, because those parts, and I tell you what parts they were. They were parts where the characters are undefeated by life struggles. That really moves me. And if you permit me, I'll read a very small extract.
Please.
I brought it because I just wanted to say how much I loved it.
Let me hold the mic for you.
This, the bag, oh, sorry.
No, it's okay.
The background is this, that Vandiyathevan, this is in part 2, he is trapped on a ship, he's abandoned alone on the ship, and the ship is being tossed by mountainous waves, and it's midnight, it's a cyclone, he knows that he's going to die. So what is his attitude at that time? Very soon, I'm reading now, very soon, Vandiyathevan realized the fate that was in store for the ship. It would be tossed and turned, it would capsize and submerge, it would be shattered to smithereens before that happened. Whatever the ship's fate was to be, his fate was crystal clear. Death in the middle of the sea. Suddenly, something hard hit Vandiyathevan on his shoulders. Pebbles thudded down all over the deck. A great many of them dropped into the sea. How did those pebbles shine like marbles? How did they fall from the sky? A few more struck him on his head and shoulders. Where they fell, there was a stab of pain at first, and then a pleasant chill. The pebbles scattered on the deck, and they were now starting to melt. This was a shower of hailstones. Until then, Vandiyathevan had never seen nor experienced anything like it. Elation bubbled up within him. Such a marvel had come his way before he died. That moment, wow. And later he says, I'm going to take a look at these mountainous waves. I'm going to look at the sea tossing itself, with such turbulence. I am lucky. I have an opportunity to see nature playing havoc. Let me enjoy it until I die. These are the moments, which really make me proud to be a human being. It is possible for us to feel that way. We don't have to be cowed down by fear and terror and horror and defeatism and, pessimism. That optimism, that is a quality, I think, that keeps, that makes you turn the page constantly in this book.
Similarly, Gauri, what was the toughest bit to translate? Because I'm sure there were times that you were like up against.
Okay, there are two things that are really difficult, and I'll try to be very short. One is the changes of style in Kalki. The advantage that a director has is he takes everything and makes it into his own style. And then there is it doesn't disturb you in any way, it flows very smoothly. Not that Kalki's style doesn't flow smoothly. In fact, they invented a word, Kalki Tamil, to describe his very special style because it just flows on and on and on. But what he does, I'll give you an example of one chapter, chapter 19 in this book, which I found really very difficult to translate. And that was because in one chapter, he employs 4 different styles. It begins with a historical introduction to a great war that was fought in 897 or something AD, and in a place called Tirupurambiyam. and this great war was fought. And then he says that, and he gives you the entire historical background and says this battle is as important in Indian history as is Plassey and Panipat, and people don't realize it. So he's just giving you a straightforward history lesson, like a very strict teacher saying, listen, pay attention, you have to know this. Then he describes that battle. And when he describes that battle, he uses the narrative style of a Harikatha exponent, or what you would find in the Mahabharata or the Ramayana. This elephants came rushing, horses came neighing, that kind of musical, grandiloquent kind of style, which moves on and on like tidal waves. And that is like a Harikatha narration. Then one of the spies who has come there to spy on another gang of spies, the Chola spy who's spying on Pandya spies, he decides to wait and hide. He climbs a tree and he decides to wait there to see these guys coming and see what they're up to, what they're hatching. And then he sees the stars through the branches. And then he starts talking to the stars. And this becomes an exercise in philosophy. He says, you saw blood flowing here, you saw flesh rotting here, and you must be thinking human beings are really rank idiots fighting and killing each other. This kind of philosophical. Finally, you have a Hitchcock noir film when the Pandya spies come and they rain down, and they talk about their plot and they rain down gold coins and so on. And that is like a dark film. Okay, so these 4 different styles, it comes so easily in Tamil, and there is such a cultural divide between Indian languages and English. How do you get it in English? I don't know. I've just done my best. That's all I can say. I mean, there's sometimes you realize that this is just not possible. And translation, even the best translation is imperfect anyway. There's no perfection in translation. So we have to just admit it, and then you feel humble. That's a good thing. So that's one thing. The second and much more difficult thing for me was, and I was telling my uncle, Kalki's son, that why does your father overload his book with so many quotations? I mean, they are from Sangam period down to modern. And then as he's not satisfied with 10 centuries of poets and poetry, he writes his own poems. So, I mean, this plethora of poetry, each in a different language, and I'm not a Tamil scholar, ancient Tamil scholar. It was, I had the help of somebody, a Tamil scholar, Nilakantan. He very patiently explained it word for word sometimes, because in the words sometimes are very difficult, and I'm not at all satisfied with my translation of those poems, but I've done my best.
You've done wonderfully well, Gauri. You're being very modest. You've done wonderfully well.
Thank you.
Coming to the relationship that Kalki shows us of the warmth and respect between siblings. In fact, I'm clearly remembering this beautiful scene in the movie also, where the 3 siblings are sitting and, he's hugging her from the back. It's just so beautiful.
That's Mani sir's imagination.
Yes, absolutely. I can't believe I'm saying this in front of him.
Actually, I loved it. Yeah.
It was really beautiful, really.
When Kundabai talks to Aditya Karikalan,
yes.
Kanchi, just beautiful. Yeah.
Really. So in the book you say, he says, but it was my sister who developed my mind and gave me knowledge and insight. And yet it is the command of the little voice within me that I value even more than her wishes. How was Kalki's own sibling relationship? Was it as special and unique?
I don't know. I was 4 years old when he passed away, and I don't remember my Periyatata or his brothers all that well, because I was really very young. But I do know that his elder brother and younger brother, they made a tremendous sacrifice for him, which really touched me. They must have had great love for each other, I thought. When he was young, there was no high school in the village, and he had to be sent to Tiruchi to study. And the family didn't have money to send all 3 boys. So even sending one boy was difficult for them, because he got a scholarship. They sent him to study in Tiruchi. Kalki got a scholarship. The other 2 boys made a sacrifice. They said, he's the smartest of the 3. It is he who should go. I thought that was, when I think of my Periyatata and Chinnatata, I really feel, I mean, they must have been lovely people to make that sacrifice.
How beautiful, really. So, as the kids talk these days, Gauri, the comet is an unpaid character in the book. That's the lingo. What, according to you, was the true significance? Because I feel there's something more. Was it some heavenly force watching over the cholas? Or there's something more that someone's not telling us.
Listen, nobody knows
No?
because see, Kalki is not here to explain. So I can only tell you what I think. I'm sure each one of you here who's read the book, you have your own and that's the interpretation. And I think that's the charm of a book, right? It's not E is equal to MC squared. So, but I can tell you what I feel. I feel that that a writer's greatness depends entirely upon his capacity to use images. And there's a lovely thing that Ezra Pound says, that an image is an intellectual and emotional complex in an instant of time. Like that, it works on both your mind and your heart, So the writer, that's the power of the image that the writer has. So the comment becomes a kind of a foreboding, looming image that threatens the people. Kalki himself was extremely progressive. His first essay was a spoof against superstitions. So I don't think he had any belief in astrology or palmistry or the comet. But he uses it, I think, because that country was in a state of unrest. It's not the comet that disturbs them. They're already disturbed. The political situation is very volatile. And the comet seems to become a visible symbol of their inner turmoil and their uneasiness. And secondly, he uses the pole star also, not so strongly. And so I think he uses these two heavenly bodies as images to say that the comet, it brings out the worst in you. It's the disturbance, it's the fears, it's the darkness, the dark fears that you have within you. The pole star is always there, unmoving. And he compares Ponniyin Selvan to the pole star, who's always upright, always honest, always truthful, by whom you find direction in the turbulent sea. The sailors find their direction. So what is the sea? The sea is Samsara Sagaram. It's the ocean is your life. All the problems we have, and the waves are the problems that we face. So you can continue, and the sea itself is supposed to be the unconscious. You can just go on and on and on and spin it, So when we read it, you don't have to be completely aware of every connotation and every meaning. But when a great writer uses images, subliminally it connects to you. That's why you're reading Ponniyin Selvan.
Wonderful, so wonderful. So, Gauri, I mentioned before, I love the story. I was so fascinated by it. What is the magnetism of this tale that continues to draw people in this day and age, in 2024?
He should answer it, not me.
Kalki? Okay.
I can give you a very short answer. I think it is that there is optimism, there is hope, there is a possibility. See, personally, I feel, and many agree with me, that Shivakami Shapatham is probably his most realized novel. Alai Osai is his masterpiece. But Shivakami Shapatham is a tragedy. And Alai Osai is a novel which is so complex. He began it as a paean of praise to glorify the Mahatma. But as he began it, the Mahatma, he just started writing Alai Osai when Mahatma Gandhi was shot dead. Kalki never recovered from it, from that shock of that assassination. So even though he wanted to write a very positive novel, it kind of, that hangs, that assassination, it hangs over his head. And it is not completely positive, you can't say. Okay. So, but Ponniyin Selvan is all positive, from start to finish. And another thing is, history also tells you that Rajaraja, who does not get the crown now, is going to become one of the most glorious monarchs of India. He's going to become a great emperor. You know the future. You are certain of that. I think maybe that has something to do with, apart from that style, character, all those things, but I think this is one of the important reasons.
Did you have a favorite character in the book?
Ponkureli.
Okay, lovely.
Absolutely.
So, I know you did a little bit on social media about these wonderful covers. So, for a book that has so many characters, how did you narrow it down?
I didn't, I mean, it's, it is true that the illustrators did ask me what I wanted because, I mean, I don't know if they can plow through every word,
Of
in the
course.
book. But actually, the cover, that cover, the first one, I'm not saying it because he's here, but something that he said made me think of it. Because he said, அந்த குதிரையில் ஒருத்தன் ஏறிண்டு போனாலே ஒரு இன்ட்ரெஸ்ட் தான் he said. ஒரு நிறைய சொல்லியிருக்கார், so that குதிரையில் போகிறதுன்னு, there is a, immediately you get the period flavor. You
Correct.
see its adventure. You know what the book is about the moment you see it, And the other thing is, I didn't want any characters. I wanted it to be more symbolic and more, for you. None of the covers will have characters depicted on it. This is not really a character. It's a kind of a symbolic idea of a journey. A book is something that you begin. It's a journey that you begin. And secondly, I wanted, this is where I really have to thank the cover illustrator, Ahala and Gunjan, and the illustrator, Mihir Joglekar. They've done a splendid job. I said, we need water-rich land. I want a green land, and it has to be water-rich. So with their first thing that they brought out, didn't suggest the water to me, water-soaked. Choranadana, Sorudaitha, the நீர்வளம் மிகுந்த நாடு. So then they splashed it with this silver. So when you hold up, it looks like running water. So, and of course, the second is very easy. It is a ship. The ship again is, when you read the story, you know why the ship is important and in the middle of the sea. Secondly, as I said, this is the Samsara Sagaram, and Kalki uses the image of the waves and the ship and water right through his entire novel. It seems to be a kind of a choric effect as an image, the sea, the waves, the water.
Beautiful, so beautiful. I could just sit here and listen all day. Now I'm coming back to the magnum opus, the movies, Gauri. It blew us all away. So I can't even imagine, how did you feel when you saw it?
I did not, I've been a film critic for many years when I was in the Hindu.
Okay.
So I never go to see a film thinking of the book.
See you, sir. Thank you for
I never
coming.
think of the book. I don't do it anymore anyway. So I never go to see a film thinking about the book because, just think about it. I mean, such rubbish novels Hitchcock took and made into such fabulous movies, right? The Godfather, you can't even read the book. It's so bad, When you have a great book, I think it's a disadvantage, really. It's a great disadvantage because to make that into, that's what worried me before. Then when I saw the film, of course, I wasn't worried. And I knew that we have in Mani sir someone who's not just a fabulous filmmaker, but a very sensitive person, And he has an interest in literary matters. So I don't know if every director could have done this. It has to appeal to the masses. You're making a film. You can't be, this is not an art film that 4 people see in a dark room. I love them, by the way. I really love them. But it's not one of those films, right? So everybody has to see it. And still it has to have integrity. It has to be true to the novel. There's not a single thing in that film, that long, both films, that makes you cringe. Nothing.
Correct.
Everything is done with such good taste, and it appeals to people. Any film which has mass appeal, we know the kind of compromises that are made, right? I'm not judging, by the way, okay? I don't judge anything because that's one of the things I've learned in my life. It's good, it's good. I mean, it's bad, it's bad. I mean, so that really surprised me. So I did not see it as a film, really. I saw it with great interest to see how Mani sir would narrate it. And I saw it as his work. I did not see it as Kalki's. I did not make that mistake. I didn't compare it at all. It's not possible to get the novel on the screen. You can't watch it. It'll be boring, It has to be changed. It has to be, he has made several changes, not very, he has made crucial changes also. I think they all worked in the context of the film. And Yeah, I'm really grateful, and I'm truly grateful also because who am I to be grateful? I'm speaking like a granddaughter now, but as a reader, a Tamil reader, I'm glad that a fantastic writer from my part of the world is now known so widely because of the film, and he has done it with great integrity. So I feel.
I truly think he has honored the books
Yes.
in the films. Truly.
Yes.
So, Gauri, what's next in the pipeline for you?
Me?
Yes.
No translation. That's for sure.
No, there's book 4, 3,
No, no, no.
4. We're already
After
planning
Ponniyin-
the launch.
After Ponniyin Selvan is over, so I'm still struggling with it. After that, I'm going to write a play. So I'm going to do some creative work.
Only.
That's it.
Thank you so much, Gauri. That was lovely.